Before I start this video, I'd like to give a shout out to the sponsors, Prime Activewear. Prime Activewear has a variety of clothes that range from hoodies to tights for females when they work out. They also have workout shirts like tank tops, and they also have some accessories like a water bottle that compresses. Yes, it is really nice. You can see some of the products on the screen right now. And if you're not convinced, you could use my promo code MUSTARD15 to get 15% off of your first purchase. So make sure you do that after watching this video. The links are down below in the description box for their website. Now, without further ado, let's get on with this video. Scottie Pippen is a 7-time All-Star, 7-time All-NBA performer, and a 10-time All-Defensive Team performer, and is a part of one of the greatest dynasties that the league has ever seen, with the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, as they had 2 three-peats during that time period, one from 1991 to 93 and another from 96 to 98. And during that time period, Scottie Pippen established himself as one of the greatest defensive players in the history of the NBA and one of the best two-way players of his generation. So one would think with all of those accolades, everybody would have a clear understanding on how great Scottie Pippen is as a player. But here we are in 2020 and people still do not know how great Scottie Pippen is as a player. It really blows my mind that we're still having these debates after so many years and after all the accomplishments that this guy has to his name, but it is what it is. Let's get on with this video. But before I get started though, I would like to ask if you guys drop a like so I can keep making fire content just like this. I just hit 40,000 subscribers and I would like to say thank you to each and every one of you guys that have helped me get to this point. My success on YouTube could not have happened without you guys, so thank you, and I appreciate each and every single one of you guys. But without further ado, let's get on with this Scottie Pippen video. Scottie Pippen was definitely one of the greatest defenders of all time, and I definitely think that when you look at the top 10 defenders, you could definitely put him on that list. If you want to put him in the top 5, I have no issue with that, and you could argue that he's the greatest player to never win a Defensive Player of the Year. But when you look at all the other players that played in Scottie Pippen's era, I think a lot of people need to understand that Scottie Pippen was arguably, from a talent perspective, not even among the top 10 players of the 90s. I mean, think about it. You have Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, and Shaquille O'Neal, because I think a lot of people do forget that Shaq did play a handful of years in Orlando and damn near played the entire decade of the 90s. So yeah, that's something to consider. And after those 6, I definitely think that it is wide open to put Scottie Pippen as you please on that list, because after that the honorable mentions come in with guys like Gary Payton, Clyde Drexler, Patrick Ewing, and Alonzo Mourning. Now, those guys are kind of fringe guys to put over Scottie Pippen, but if you put them over Scottie Pippen from a talent perspective, I really wouldn't hate on you. Now, when you're ranking the players of the 90s, those guys should be below Scottie Pippen purely based off of the accomplishments. That's really the reason why those guys should be higher than Scottie Pippen. But when you look at the talent perspective, Payton, Drexler, Ewing, and Alonzo Mourning, I think that you can definitely argue those guys were better than Scottie Pippen, just saying. And let's not forget, Patrick Ewing did beat Scottie Pippen in the 2nd round the year after Michael Jordan did retire. So I definitely think that that is something to consider. But moving on to another thing that I do also hear about Scottie Pippen is where he ranks in the pecking order of small forwards in NBA history. I think we can all agree that LeBron, Larry Bird, KD, and Dr. J are higher than Scottie Pippen without question. But then when you dig deeper, you got guys like Kawhi Leonard, John Havlicek, and Rick Barry, who in my personal opinion are higher than Scottie Pippen, and I didn't even mention a guy like Elgin Baylor and James Worthy. So I definitely think that when you look at the small forward list, Scottie Pippen is not as high as a lot of people put him, just because of those 6 championships that he has, because that's really the only talking point. Because if you remove those 6 championships, he's not even in the top 10. So I definitely think that that is something that a lot of people need to understand about Scottie Pippen. Also, another thing about Scottie Pippen that absolutely nobody talks about are his playoff performances, because there are numerous series of Scottie Pippen just playing absolutely terrible and Michael Jordan has to pick up the slack. And I'm talking critical series here. I'm not talking any just random series out the ass. I'm talking very critical series that could have put the Bulls dynasty in jeopardy. For example, you could look at the 1996 series against Seattle in the NBA Finals, where Jordan was a little bit inefficient, but nobody ever talks about the fact that Scottie Pippen was terrible, and I mean terrible. He averaged 16 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists, as well as 2 steals and a block, but shot 34% from the field and 23% from 3 on nearly 7 attempts a game. Like, really, that is terrible offense at its finest, and nobody talks about that at all, and it honestly kind of blows my mind. But then you could also look at other performances in his career, such as the infamous Eastern Conference Finals against the Indiana Pacers that went to 7 games in '98, where Scottie Pippen was once again awful, as he averaged 17 points, 8 assists, and also 5 rebounds, but he shot 39% from the field and 20% from 3, and to even make it worse, he shot 58% from the free throw line. Like, I really don't understand how bad he really was in that series, and in all aspects of efficiency, he was awful, just god awful. And another thing that a lot of people don't talk about when it comes to Scottie Pippen is his time in Houston. Now, I understand that Scottie Pippen was older, he was not in his prime, but he was 33 years old. Let's not act like he was 38. I don't think the cutoff year in terms of you being criticized is 33. And he had a lesser offensive role on that team because he wasn't the #1 or #2 option, as that was Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley. But in the playoffs against the Los Angeles Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, and I know some people are going to say, oh, but that's Kobe and Shaq. Well, don't use that excuse, because they both had the same record of 31 and 19 in that lockout shortened year. But in the first round against the Lakers, Scottie Pippen was horrendous, as he averaged 18 points and also 12 rebounds, as well as 6 assists. But on some of the worst shooting of his career, 33% from the field and 27% from 3 on nearly 6 attempts a game. That is awful. That is completely horrendous from a third option that you would think the numbers would be a little bit more efficient, but it just wasn't. And Scottie Pippen has a lot of performances like this. I'm not going to run down each and every single one of them, but I just wanted to point out the top 3 worst. But moving on to another point about Scottie Pippen that I hear consistently in the NBA community is how great Scottie Pippen would have been without Michael Jordan. And the #1 thing that a lot of people point to is the 1994 season, where Scottie Pippen put up the best numbers of his career, averaging 22 points, 9 rebounds, and 6 assists on 49% shooting from the field and around 32% from 3. But despite the numbers that he put up and leading the Chicago Bulls to only 2 less games than they had the previous year, I think this year is very overrated by people that want to put LeBron James over Michael Jordan, because they'll look at the win and loss column and jump to the conclusion that Michael Jordan wasn't as valuable as a lot of people say he was because they only dropped 2 games. Meanwhile, in reality, that is just completely far from the truth, and they're not putting any context behind both of those years. Because when you look at the year that Scottie Pippen led the Bulls, they literally went out and they got Tony Kukoc, Steve Kerr, Pete Myers, and also Luke Longley for the games that he played to fill in for Michael Jordan's absence. So I definitely think that that needs to be addressed. And also, it wasn't just Pippen that stepped up. Horace Grant and BJ Armstrong, who were on the roster previously in the year before, also stepped up, especially Horace Grant, who went from a 13-9 guy on 50% field goal shooting to a 15-11 guy on 52% field goal shooting. So if you're gonna give credit to Scottie Pippen and give him all this boost just because they only won 2 less games than the previous year that they had won the title with Michael Jordan, then credit needs to be given to guys like BJ Armstrong and Horace Grant, who were on the roster the previous year just like Scottie Pippen, and they stepped up and elevated their games to help the Chicago Bulls win games in that Eastern Conference. So I definitely think that a lot of people do not put context behind that season. And what's crazier about that 94 season is that literally nobody, and I mean nobody, talks about the fact that Scottie Pippen underperformed yet again in the playoffs of that year against the New York Knicks. Because against the New York Knicks in the 1994 playoffs, in the second round, yes, Scottie Pippen averaged 22, 8, and 5, as well as 2 steals, but he shot below 41% from the field and 31% from 3. So I just don't understand why a lot of people just brush over the fact that Scottie Pippen underperformed that year in the playoffs, but they love to harp on what he did and what he accomplished in the regular season. And I also find it crazy that absolutely nobody to this day addresses the fact that in 1995, the Bulls almost missed the playoffs. They were 34-31 until Michael Jordan came back, and they went 13-4 in their last 17 games, and they finished that season with a 47-35 win record, and then they made the playoffs. They barely snuck into the playoffs had it not been for Michael Jordan coming back out of retirement. These are things that are a part of Scottie Pippen's legacy, and when I hear people say that he could have been a #1 guy on a championship team, seasons like this make a take like that sound so stupid. But in conclusion, let me say this. When it comes to if Scottie Pippen is overrated, I personally believe that he is. I think too many people like to put on Scottie Pippen's legacy just so they can take away from Michael Jordan, and honestly, it's really the LeBron fans. And I may be speaking from a perspective that may be a little skewed because I'm always on Twitter and I'm always seeing the stupid takes from those people, but I have to be honest with you guys. It's too many of those takes for me to say that he's not an overrated player. And just because I say he's overrated does not mean that he's not great. It does not mean that he's not a Hall of Famer. It does not mean that he's not among the 10 best small forwards of all time, or he's not among the top 50 players in NBA history, because I'm sure a lot of people will say that in the comment section. But it just means that he's been elevated to a level that realistically he is just not on. And I think it's really the LeBron fans that do that just so they can take credit away from Michael Jordan. But that concludes this video. Make sure you comment your opinions down below. I would love to hear your opinions about Scottie Pippen's career. Do you think he's overrated or not? Also, make sure you drop a like so I can keep making content just like this. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. All of my social media links are down below in the description box. It's your boy Young Mustard signing out. Thank you so much for 40,000 subscribers. Y'all have a great day. Peace.